Welcome to today's VMware Software Defined Storage session. My name is Travis Lawrence. I am a systems engineer with Arrow ECS. Today we're going to take a look at virtual SAN. So we'll provide a brief demonstration so you can help understand what customer critical business issues vSAN really solves. But we're going to look at that from a sales perspective. So we'll try to keep this a brief demonstration. But I do think it's really important, even from a sales perspective, to take a look at the vSAN interface and then to really relate that back to those customer issues. So when we're on sales calls or other conversations, we can really provide some value to the customer during those processes. But first, I wanted to detail some of the Arrow engineering services that we have available as well. So our pre-sales engineers are available for sales conversations. So if you have sales calls with your sales teams or your technical teams that need some additional VMware expertise, we can provide assistance there. We also have a solutions lab based out of Denver, Colorado that you can access remotely for those variety of teams. And then finally, we have a large number of webinar and web enablement, social enablement activities that you should see through the VMware newsletter. I would also like to provide my contact information. You can reach out to me at tlawrence@arrow.com or at tlawrence on Twitter. And with that, let's get into the vSAN demo. Again, just a very brief demonstration here to really have a sales-focused look at what the product does, what the interface looks like, and how it provides a benefit to those customers. In today's VMware Virtual SAN demonstration, we're going to provide you a brief look at the vSphere interface and the vSAN interface from a sales perspective. And I want to do that for a variety of reasons. Number one, just so you understand the look and feel from an administrative perspective. We'll do this very high level and really focus on the key sales points, the things that you can talk to your customers about to help them understand what the requirements are and what the benefits are of vSAN. Two, I think it's important to understand the frequently asked questions that we have from a technical sales perspective. So again, in those initial customer conversations, trying to understand what the customer critical business issue is and if vSAN is a solution for that, it's really important to understand those key components. So we will look at a few things here. One being host requirements, what hardware is required for a vSAN deployment. We see a lot of questions around that. Number two, licensing. What type of licensing do I need to have in place for vSAN? What do we need to purchase? How is it licensed? Three, networking requirements around 1 or 10 gig networking. What pieces need to be in place, or how can we change our existing network to provide for vSAN? And then finally, what does it look like when we actually enable vSAN? How difficult is it? So again, I want to keep this fairly high level, a quick demonstration, give you a good idea of the look and feel of the vSphere 6 web client and how we enable and work with vSAN. So from a host perspective, we need to always have at least 3 hosts in our vSAN cluster. This is for us to provide resiliency amongst the disks and be able to make sure data is written in multiple places. So in our environment here, I've got at least 3 hosts. Some other considerations around this are we can use any paid version of vSphere, but we need to make sure that we have a few critical hardware components. So number one, we need a server that is on the vSphere 5.5 Update 1 or vSphere 6.0 hardware compatibility list. Most servers today, many servers, newer servers today will be on that list, but we need to verify that. We also need to make sure that we have an array controller that's on the vSAN hardware compatibility list, in addition to an SSD and spinning disk on the vSAN compatibility list. So we see a lot of customers running into issues around that where they assume that since they can run vSphere 5.5 or 6.0 that they have all the components, and that vSAN, since it's just a software component, can be easily enabled. Well, it is very easy to enable vSAN, but we do need to make sure we've got those hardware components in place, that we've got the right hardware that can provide the performance that we need. We see that in 85%+ of cases that customers need some type of new hardware component when they purchase vSAN licensing. So that's benefit to you as a reseller to be able to have the expertise to understand what is required, and then that usually adds to the sale in that regard. But it is very important to understand that from a customer perspective, we do not see many customers that have an existing vSphere implementation that has all of the correct hardware components from a previous implementation that will work with vSAN. So we need to scrutinize their environment and make sure that we check those boxes regarding hardware compatibility. Another important component in this scenario is licensing. So from a licensing perspective, it's very simple to license vSAN. Once we've purchased a license, it's easy for us to go into the vCenter licensing component and add our vCenter license, our vSAN license rather. But from a licensing perspective, it is good to discuss that vSAN is licensed per physical CPU socket, just like vSphere. So that's the key component to remember, that vSAN is licensed much like vSphere is. And if we have a 3-host environment that has 6 physical CPUs, for the vSAN component, we need to have 6 vSAN licenses. Another important consideration is networking. So looking at our networking configuration here, VMware recommends 10 gigabit adapters for production vSAN workloads. 10 gigabit adapters are required for the all-flash component of vSAN. 1 gigabit adapters are supported, but are usually recommended more for test or development environments, or even in smaller SMB environments. When we do use 1 gig adapters, we need to make sure that we dedicate specific adapters for vSAN traffic. So from a networking perspective, we can take a glance at one of our hosts and look at the vSwitch that's been created specifically for vSAN. In this case, in my lab environment, since I only have 1 gig adapters, I do dedicate a specific network card to vSAN. But again, from a sales perspective, it's really important just to ask the questions around what type of networking does a customer have, what is the use case for vSAN, and then finally, from a vSAN perspective, is how easy it is to actually enable the technology. So again, this is a cluster level technology. We can look at our cluster 2 that we have that has 3 hosts. Under the Virtual SAN tab, you can see in this environment, I've already enabled vSAN. But once we've met all those requirements, so again, reviewing our hosts are on the hardware compatibility list. We have an array controller, SSD, and spinning disk. We've purchased our licensing or have trial licensing and implemented that, 1 license per physical CPU, just like vSphere. We've met the networking requirements either for 10 gig networking, or we have dedicated 1 gig adapters on each host to pass vSAN traffic. From there, we can come into our vCenter interface and click Edit and enable vSAN. So at this point, it's very simple. We can check the box to turn on or enable vSAN, and then we select the disk method that we want. So how are we going to select the disks that vSAN uses? In this case, I have it set to manual. We can take a quick look at what the disk layout looks like. And all this really does is allows us to select which disks in the cluster on which hosts are used for Virtual SAN. So Virtual SAN has to claim the entire disk and use the entire disk to write data to. This allows us to select which disks are used so that we don't overwrite any existing vSphere data stores. When we go through that manual process, we can actually select this button to look at the eligible disks within the cluster. And from there, we can see which of those disks are available for us to install vSAN on. And then once we've claimed those disks and click OK, we actually have a data store mounted automatically to each host. And a data store is just really a storage container for us to use to place virtual machines and associated files on. So from here, we can select related objects, select data stores, and this process has automatically mounted a vSAN data store that is really the combined storage of all the 3 hosts that I have in this environment. So 5.4 terabytes of storage that uses spinning disk and also uses that SSD for cache that speeds and provides us better performance. So I hope this has been a beneficial quick look at vSAN, highlighting some of those important technical sales questions that you can use in customer engagements and that really provide you a high-level sort of question and answer piece for those customers. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your Arrow Inside Sales team members or to myself, Travis Lawrence, tlawrence@arrow.com, and we're glad to assist you with any of these components with the hardware requirements, licensing, host requirements, or technical demonstrations around how vSAN is installed and enabled. Thanks for joining us, and please look for other technical sessions.